Do political scientists have labs? Do they conduct experiments? Traditionally, they haven't, but that's all beginning to change. Using controlled experiments, political scientists have begun to reveal how citizens interact with their governments in subtle ways. Two Vanderbilt professors, Cindy Kam and Liz Zechmeister, are exploring this new field.
So experiments can help us because we can tweak one little aspect of how we talk about a policy or one characteristic of a candidate, such as their partisanship, holding everything else constant, and then determine what the effect of, say, partisanship is on someone's vote choice.
What is the connection between this external jolt of information or other type of stimulus that we might be interested in the political world and the behavior or the opinions and attitudes that we see people express afterwards? So
faculty in the Vanderbilt Political Science Department conduct their experiments here in the Research on Individuals, Politics, and Society, or RIPS lab. Zechmeister and Kam, along with two other Vanderbilt professors, founded the lab in 2008.
It's a lab where we study how ordinary people make decisions about politics. And the way that it typically runs is we have a group of faculty and graduate students who come together and decide what studies they want to execute. We have graduate students and undergraduates who help us administer those studies, and we rely on undergraduates and members of the community and the Vanderbilt community to come in and take our studies.
Since the founding of the RIPS lab, Vanderbilt political scientists have applied experimental methods to numerous political questions.
So one of the things that I've done with the lab is to look at how people respond to information about threats. So for example, terrorist threat in the lab setting. And what we're trying to do is mimic the type of information that would be present in an individual's information environment in times of an actual terrorist threat. And what we can find is that there's a real difference in people's attitudes toward politics when they're thinking about terrorism compared to when they're not thinking about terrorism, when they're not thinking about threat at all.
So people may have a sense that emotions affect decision making, but it's sort of hard to capture that in surveys. It's hard to ask someone, how are you feeling today, and then see what effect that might have on their attitudes. So in our lab, we actually induced emotions, and we did that by having people watch videos. So we took some of the tools from psychology, where psychologists have figured out how to induce emotions, and we used them for political science because after people watched these videos, they answered a series of public opinion questions. And so by looking at the difference between people who watched a happy movie versus people who watched an angry movie versus people who watched a fearful movie, we can tell what the role of emotion is on political decision making.
Zechmeister and Kam have also worked with faculty from Vanderbilt's psychology department to design experiments.
Yeah, Cindy, John, and I did a pilot study a couple of years ago. What Cindy's doing is basically psychology. It's just questions a bit different, but we use exactly the same methodology. I think of Cindy as a really social psychologist in disguise.
However, political science, because of its very nature, will always pose challenges for experimental research.
I will say, though, we're not a hard science in that we deal with people. And in fact, that's harder, I think, and we're more difficult because people are unpredictable. People are really hard to predict in a way that an inert matter may not be. And so sometimes I think we have a harder job.
For InsideVandy, I'm Harrison Dreves.